focused on advancement success for executives, professionals, and graduate students. Prior to starting Dreambridge Partners, she graduated from Harvard College and Harvard Business School, and she spent 25 years in leadership positions in marketing management for top worldwide consumer brands like Procter & Gamble, Campbell Soup Asia, and Polaroid. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Judy Shen-Filerman.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out. I was driving in and, had that ugly rain this morning. My hair's like, great, it's a girl thing. I was like, that's all frizzy. But, so I'm driving in and the sun starts to peek out. It starts to dry. And I'm like, hallelujah, yay. So thank you for coming in on this kind of weather. And also probably this is a good moment for us just to have a moment of silence to remember what happened a year ago today at the marathon. So if we could just do that for about 10 seconds and think about all of those that unfortunately had passed away or hurt, and thankfully for all the responders that were there to help them out. Okay, just for a second. Thank you for that moment. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is this notion of storytelling and why storytelling is so important for your career success over the longevity of your life. And I know that Deborah Spar is here last week with a fantastic talk, really talking about this notion of superwoman and what perfectionism is all about, why feminism still is very much needed in our world. And I would really have to agree with her, having been in the workforce now for 25 years or so. And I think one of the real opportunities is this notion of storytelling. Who am I, and how do I relate myself to the world that is out there? And let me just kind of quickly go into the next slide here. Maybe I'll see where else, stand up here or down there. And this notion of your voice and your story and why that is so important as you go along. Probably the biggest shift that we're all going to see, that I know I experienced, and that I experienced today as I teach across the spectrum from graduate students to executives, is this notion of how do I make important choices in my life? How do I make important choices at work? How do I have moments of true leadership? And that's not actually any moment where you have an equal sign, because there's an answer behind the equal sign. The really, really important things you're going to do in life doesn't have an equal sign. So all you're going to have is you. Your values, your passion, what do you really stand for, and what are you going to do about that? And so over a period of years in your career, you're going to go from having more equal signs to less and less equal signs. The question is, how are you going to respond to that? And then importantly, story is everything. If you think about human beings from the beginning of time, it's always been oral storytelling before we had words, before we knew how to write. And so we relate at a story level more than we do at a data level. There are a lot of books now coming out, gronking with a lot of research about that, but at the end of the day, that's really important. So for all of you that are in this very, very technical area, the question is, what does your amazing complex work boil down in story? Because that's how we make decisions. That's how we really, really think about what we're going to invest in, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, whether you get a grant or not, those kinds of things. Okay, so I'm going to really focus on those two things. I really want to make this interactive. I'm a coach by nature, so talking to a crowd for an entire hour just makes me crazy because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to answer the questions that you have. So you have index cards there. So as I'm talking, you have questions that pop up. Please give them to the chairs or the other organizers that are here, and I'll do my best to answer them along the way, because some of the questions I've gotten already are fairly importantly tactical aspects I want to make sure I get to. And at the same time, I really want to make sure I get to this broader question about voice and story that I find is the compelling need in terms of career success over a period of a long time. So let me just go really back into my own story. I actually know this building really, really well, having very, very little technical bone in my life and my body. Actually, I married into MIT. Okay, so my husband was an ATO guy, but apparently I think ATO is shut down for some bad reasons. You may be a little too young to understand. But anyway, so he was an ATO guy. He was course 2, and then got his a master's degree here as well, and was in Mechie design for a good period of time in R&D. And then, frankly, this notion of voice, he was always one of those R&D guys that loved to go out and talk to people and talk to the vendors and figure out what was going on the business side. So before long, about 10 years or so, he realized that sitting at the bench really wasn't his thing. And so he went to product management at Hewlett-Packard in their medical products division, and then has done software development, but all within medical industry, and now is in startup and incubation, right? So one of the really cool things for you to see, at least from him as an alum, is he started with one particular aspect of doing Mech-E and then evolved into places that he never thought that he would ever do. So when I was with him, I was on the other side of Mass Ave, and I was a liberal arts gal, and he was a tech guy, and who would know that at the end of the day, we both ended up in business. My undergrad was actually East Asian Studies, and what's about the story that's really interesting is, so I see there's some Asian folk in here, or at least anybody who's a kind of an immigrant family understands my story, which was I came to the States when I was 6 from Taiwan. My parents basically escaped to Taiwan from China during World War II. And so, we grew up in New York City, loved New York City. I'm still a city girl, even though I've been in Boston for over 20 years. And there really was a lot of hope and pressure on the child, make us proud, don't worry, we've only sacrificed our lives for you, kind of thing. So that's why I married a half Jewish guy. Between the Jewish and the Chinese, we were just perfect pair. And so the notion was that I got into Harvard, and my mother thought, well, wouldn't it be great if, you just did something safe? So I said, great. I took economics. I was like dying and bored, right? And then eventually said, okay, let me play a little safe, and went to government. And I kept on taking these electives on the side in East Asian Studies, because my father actually was a real historical buff, if you will. And so I started taking a lot of these East Asian Studies courses on the side that didn't really make any sense. And then eventually became an EAS major, much to my mother's chagrin. My father's very happy, but as a lot of dads, he doesn't say much, he just smiled, right? But I knew I got his approval. Anyway, so the point is, at that point, 1988, getting an East Asian Studies major made no sense. Then I did something that made even less sense, which was to go to Taiwan for a year and learn Chinese, right, and get better at it. Why would anybody ever do that? Japan was big at that point. China had no real relevance at that point either. But something inside of me, this thing called a voice, said, go, figure this out, try to see what it is. Everyone at that point is going to do investment banking, and I had some investment banking offers. In the end, went to Procter & Gamble doing brand management because I loved ideas, I loved new things, and I had no idea what brand management was, and happened to get that job because I was filling a seat for a friend, okay, and happened to learn about it. And who would have known that P&G would give me a year off to go study so I can actually start a year later. So what's funny is 25 years later, I'm doing work. I have my own company in Dreambridge Partners after 25 years of corporate work where I was lucky, I worked hard, but was one of the youngest VPs at Polaroid at that time. And then, as Deborah Sparrow may talk about, is this notion of, you're the youngest VP, you're an Asian, you're a woman, and there's all this internal pressure to be perfect, right? And somehow it happened, and it was all going to turn out so well. Except I was, at that point, 33, and the biggest difference between women and men during that time, and really important for you to understand, if you choose to have children, things tend to start to have a clock. Okay, and so I was with the guys the entire time coming out of Harvard Business School. I was tracking, I was the youngest VP at Polaroid. I had taken some entrepreneurial turns around, and then I couldn't have a child. And so I was sitting there, and the doctor was like, I'm not sure what we can do about this. And so here I was at the height of my career, quote unquote, and I may never have a child. And one has to decide at that point, what do we really care about? What do we really care about? And there my voice came back again. Right? And I said, okay, I had to launch the first e-business ever for Polaroid. Can I launch it for them? And then what will I do thereafter? And my boss at that time, who was a corporate VP, gave me one of the best advice I'd ever had, which was, you can always have a career, but as a woman, you may not always be able to have a child. Think about that. And so at the age of 34, after having tried for about 3 years of having a child not being successful, I decided to leave. Right? So everyone said, oh my gosh, it was the .com era. You must be going to CMO at some big company. You're just not telling us. I was like, no, I'm just leaving. And nobody could believe that someone at my level would just leave corporate America altogether. But I did. So I launched the business, and literally the next week I was gone. Right? So it sounds like a great story, except I'm sitting there with no branding, no title, for the first time, no income at all. And I had to go to a wedding literally a month later, and I said to my husband, I don't think I can go to the wedding. He's like, what's wrong with you? Go to the wedding. And I said to him, but I'm a nobody now. Right? So all these years of building up to be a somebody because I was somebody outside was that I made this moment of change. I went from 500 miles an hour to 0, and I literally flipped over the other side. Okay, I won't go into a lot of details about what happened then. But miraculously, a month later, no fertility drugs, woo, baby came on, right? So now I have 2 children. One is my daughter, Alyssa, is 12. My son, LJ, is 9. And my point here is not to say there's a right or wrong answer for anything, but the hard choices in your career is not necessarily exactly when am I going to get my promotion. What's the next big project? But over a long span of 30 years or so in a career, 40, and if I'm lucky, I'm going to get to work 60 years. Right? I don't plan to retire because I love my work so much. My point is, what does that arc look like for you? And in that arc, there's going to be changes. And for women, I like to say that, with all due respect to Sheryl Sandberg, that leaning in is enough, but it ain't. Okay? There's a lot of other considerations that we all have to make given the voices that are within ourselves and the story that we choose to tell about ourselves. So I think it's really important for you to think about that, which comes to how did I end up having Dreambridge Partners? So during that time that I was off and without child at that point, I started to volunteer. And I went to work for the Jewish Vocational Services and working with immigrants and refugees and so on and so forth. And I realized that this one thing that I had taken for granted actually was a real help for others. I had figured out, I've decoded basically how to advance in corporate America at a pretty fast clip. And yet I've always lived between cultures. I'm still fluent in Chinese. I go back to China and they don't know that I'm American, which is probably one of the best compliments to my parents. And so I've lived between these worlds my entire life. And so I decided, oh gosh, I can actually do a lot of translation here. I can really help people begin to understand that there are different ways of doing things, there are different ways of leadership, there are different ways of communications, neither of which is right or wrong. And so, during that, what I call the meandering during that time was recognizing I have something to give that I like to think about. And so I had the luxury, my husband at the time was fully employed, I ended up going and just starting to teach at the Adult Education Center and so on and so forth. And before you knew it, as this kind of serendipity, someone found my class in a catalog, and there began my business in teaching at universities. And so now, 10 years later, I'm lecturing across the country at business schools, leading business schools, non-ranked business schools. It doesn't really matter to me about the name brand of the schools. What I care about is the fact that I'm working largely with international students, many of them today coming from Asia, who have no idea how the US works and why individualism and storytelling and having, right, is so important for power in the United States. And so I'm a cultural translator. I work with the international students at business schools, I work with faculty members, and as well as with advisors to really understand that if you come from different parts of the world, like you want to be a global leader, you really want to be a global leader, get ready to be uncomfortable, right? Because if you want to work in your own comfortable way, that's not what globalness is all about at all. What it is about is saying, wait a minute, I realize there's a different way of looking at things, and let me adapt to what that really is. So these international students are coming in at high clip and trying to figure out within 1 year or 2 years how to become American and go out and get a job. You can imagine how hard that is. Coming from very collectivistic cultures, that's not about me at all, into a culture that is frankly all about me and how good I am, and therefore why you having a story is incredibly critical to your career success. If you do not have a story in the United States, you are invisible. If you work hard at work, good for you. And you'll get really rewarded for the first 4 years because technical stuff is what counts. After that, it's all about influence. And what's influence? Telling stories. Okay? So you're going to see over a period of time, those who are good at telling stories and technically brilliant, and all of you are, will begin to make the advances, and their curve of slope is going to be like this. And for those that are less storytellers, okay, I'm just being really frank, especially if you go into industry and even academia, who gets tenure? Who gets the grants, right? Grant is storytelling. There's a slope difference that you begin to see, right? So it's really important early on that you learn how to tell stories. And so then I work not only with international business school, business students, but also with mid-level professionals, right? So, and what I see oftentimes is that they've been technically really, really competent, right? So all of you, there is no doubt that you are technically competent and brilliant in the ways that you are. And the challenge, the reason that oftentimes that I get called into organizations is, but we need to get them to talk up in class or in the team meetings. They need to present a little more effectively than what they're doing. And what they are more underdeveloped in is communications and storytelling, okay? And so what I do is really help them understand, how do you find story, how do you tell story, how do you begin to connect with people, and that's really where the balance is. The upper end of it is executive coaching that I do. So these are very, very senior level people, right around the CEO levels, maybe 1 or 2 levels below that. And again, the only reason they ever bring me in is not because of anything that they have to do content-wise, because they wouldn't be at those positions if they weren't amazing at that, right? But what they lack is, again, the working with people, inspiring people, figuring out how to work it. And frankly, for some of the women that I work with, and this is what's really important to the women that are sitting here, is how do you influence in a group that is not women largely? How do you influence when the group is largely men? And while things have really, really changed, and I come to MIT now from where I was in the mid-'80s, and it's like a different place, right? Which is like fabulous, right? So, a lot of the women at ATO were not in-house students, as you know what I mean, right? And so I think it's wonderful that that shift has happened over a period of time. But if you choose to go into industry or academia, you will still largely be in the minority. So then the question is, how do you effectively then communicate to people that may be thinking and processing differently? And what I oftentimes hear for those that are in senior positions, like these are the women that have proven themselves at the senior-most levels, and you know what? They need to have a little more oomph. They need to really put their points out there a little more strongly. And the curse of all being a woman sometimes is you gotta be tough, but you gotta be likable, right? So for anyone that says, the likability factor doesn't really matter, at least based on my experience and my own advancement and coaching others, the likability factor does matter. They don't have to love you or anything of that sort, but respect is great too. Respect is important, but this notion of, and likability isn't for me needing your social approval. I'm not talking about that. It's talking about, can I connect with other people? Can I make conversations with other people? As we talk about a lot of times when we used to do interviewing, that a lot of you may be going through, is when you're, so you go through 3 rounds of interviews. You've got the first round where they basically eliminate people that technically are just not going to fit, or they totally don't fit in the company. Second level is, the second round usually is, let's see if socially we think they can fit into our culture, because and they'll give some more kind of maybe problem sets and see if you can technically fit in. And the third round always is culture fit. Do you know what the big question is? If I had to go on a 4-hour plane ride with the 4 individuals, which 2 of the 4 would we want to go on the ride with? Okay? So oftentimes that's a last round elimination, and that really is and that really is an important thing for you to think about. Now, if you have amazing technical prowess, which I know you do because you're sitting here, that can actually eliminate some of the need for social dynamism and story over a period of time. But if you're looking to have a leadership role at some point, and you're going to be leading people at some point that you want to do that, that notion of storytelling does become incredibly important. Okay? And so I want to draw a curve for you here. Let's see where my pen. pen up here. Okay, so I've just kind of go through this trajectory right now of my own story, how I ended up being here. Let me just kind of, and then I want to draw a chart and actually ask you some questions, see if you have any questions, make sure it's interactive. So I didn't actually finish the point about where I am in Dreambridge Partners. So after having had a chance to do these things, I decided I want to have my own company. I had an opportunity to probably go back to corporate America, but I would be on the plane at least 40% of the time. And after having such a hard time having children, I was like, I'm not willing to give that up anymore, right? And so, so I think the system, frankly, if you choose, and this is no right or wrong answer, but I have friends coming to business schools that are the executives at companies and so on and so forth. So it's all an individual choice. But for me, being present with my children, being there for to see him or her walk, taking them to school, the mundane things, getting things ready for breakfast, sitting there doing homework with them, taking them to their classes, actually is where I connect with them. And so it's it's been incredibly important for me to be part of that in their lives. And if I choose to be in corporate America at a very executive level, that's just simply not a choice set that I can afford to have. And so what I have decided is, as an HBS grad, frankly, is that I've chosen to have an integrated family. Do you know what you lose on that? For now, what I've lost for now is external status. I'm not an EVP, corporate vice president anywhere. And my income is probably lower than where it could be, right? And yet my life has a fulfillment level that if you want to quantify in some way, it's probably quantifiable, but it's not what anybody sees on the outside. And they probably say, gosh, you're a CEO of your own company, which is great, but you could be a bigger company. You could be running a division somewhere, running a company somewhere. Wouldn't you want to do that? And so, again, it comes back to the voice, right? I have a lot of voices out there that tell me what I could do or should do, but it's only through going through a lot of these and hitting, frankly, a lot of walls and having a lot of falls that I realize, okay, the only voice I can trust is my own. And in fact, this work that I do now is such pleasure that I don't mind staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning after my kids have gone to bed, because I just want to get this one thing of this course and get it really, really, really right. Or my client's having a real issue. Let me really think this through so I can help him or her out the next time I see him or her. And so, and then I purposely have luckily I have a house that's big enough that I have an office with employees down in the basement, right? So it sounds crazy. My kids come home, and I do have a caregiver, and they come and they run in, they say hello, they leave, and I can hear the footsteps, and there I'm with them. And then you see me here, and I go to corporate America. They don't see that version of me, but that's okay, because I've chosen my own version of an integrated life. This is my choice. And my point is, each one of you has to begin to figure out what is a choice that's going to be right for you. Do you want a partner? And I'm talking, I know this goes for men and women, because this is the Graduate Women's Association. I want to really focus on where that trajectory for your career is going to be. I will get to the technical aspects of it as well, but the biggest difference you're going to see is in the mid-30s. Okay? Because if a woman chooses to have a child, that's the time when probability starts to work against us. Okay? And so the question then is, you're tracking with all the guys up until mid-30s, and if you choose to have a child, what happens at that point? And then that's where you have the biggest splintering of where women go afterwards. I would say that they've had data where once you're out, women tend to be out for 7 to 10 years. Okay? And the reason is, if you choose to have at least 2 kids and you wait till they go to kindergarten, you know, you're waiting about 10 years at that point. So what do you do during that decade of your life? There's a lot of great things, by the way. We don't go sit there and like play with our thumbs, you know. But so anyway, so I think I want you to really, you're still at the other end of it, right? I understand that. For a lot of you, you're like, what the heck is she talking about? At the same time, I just want you to be conscious that when you look at the trajectory, and that day when you're sitting there going, what the heck is going on? Why am I so confused? I've been so clear on where I've wanted to go, and now that I've chosen to partner with somebody and we're choosing to have a family, why am I feeling so out of my body? And what you need to realize when that happens, that it is not you. It is the nature of life, except that the system that you currently have in this particular society is not stacked in favor of individuals who have to bear children. That's just a reality, you know? And I just gave you an example of that. Anyone that's telling you differently, they must be living on another planet. Okay? So to think that we don't have any trade-offs along this continuum is just not really right. At the same time, what's great is you can have it all at just different phases in your life. I expect that this will be a multi-million-dollar business that I have. I really do. And it's not about arrogance. It's just a vision that I have had, that voice thing, right? And ever since my son went to kindergarten, woo, my pedals started to go back on again, my HBS head came back, and I'm rolling in a different way, but on my own terms. Okay, so I just want to give you at least that trajectory of where I've been in terms of my story and why voice is so important, because along the way, what you care about is not what other people care about. And if you're used to making decisions based on what other people care about, it becomes rather painful over a period of your life. And the thing I have found is those who are really, really, really successful tends to be the people where other voices have been really important in their lives, and then finding a way to get their own voice and really hear it and honor it. Okay? And I see some numbers here from Asian cultures. Okay? Asian culture, what you want just doesn't matter. Right? There are responsibilities that you need to fulfill and therefore fulfill it. Except we're actually at an age, for women and for men, where if you don't know where you're going to go, you're basically like a kite flying in the wind without any anchor, you're just going to go. Right? So that also is a cultural change that a lot of us are going to go through. All right. So I think it's really important for you to begin to understand that. And then the reason my business has been successful over a period of time, and the fact that I have been able to advance in my career, is the fact that I'm actually a pretty good storyteller. Right? Not that it's conscious. I've always loved talking. I know it's a surprise. And so that storytelling and connecting with people and finding meaning in where my connection is with people have somehow helped me over a period of time as well. So begin to think about that as well. So really for me, it's just one example, but I'm hoping this one example gives you at least a sense of where career development could be for you, and thinking about that transition from academia, where there is a track, where there is a very clear grade, if you will, of what it is that's good. And what's acceptable. And when you go into research, it gets a little more fuzzy, but there's still some paradigms. And then the next 40 years is a track without a whole lot of walls if you want to truly be your best, right? If you really want to fly, if you really just want to, man, I've got this one life, and what am I going to do with this so that it has meaning? So at the other end of it, I said, darn, that was a good life that I had. You can't live in other people's walls. You've got to be able to fly and soar the way that you can do it and the way you want to do it. And the best leaders have found that magic somehow. And let me guarantee you that there are people that are very, very senior in positions of power who are miserable. Okay? So status does not equate with happiness. It does for a short period of time, and then kind of flinters after that. Okay, so I'd like to turn it back to you about voice, story. When you came in and said, I want to do something, I'm curious about this thing about storytelling or academic to professional success. I'd like for you to help me contour this other half of the conversation in terms of where I can be helpful for you, what questions you have, any questions you have for me right now. Like take a midpoint check and then keep on going. Thoughts? Judy, please talk about this. Hello.
Okay, I guess my kind of general question is, it's hard to know when to tell which story, because when you meet people, you don't get a chance to just sit them down for a couple hours and tell them your whole life story.
Right.
You know,
right.
To whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's that? What are some heuristics? What are some tips for knowing when to tell which part of your story?
Perfect. Okay, so may I use you as an example?
Sure.
Okay, so as you can tell, I'm like and I've talked to you, so I know that you seem very, very open. So let's say that you're looking at, I remember you were saying you're going to industry, right? Okay, and so if you're going to industry, you're going to interview, I always say you've got to know your audience. Who is your audience? So my background is in brand management and marketing, right? Between detergents and cameras and so on and so forth. Your number one question is, who is my audience and what do they care about? Right? Storytelling that's effective gets a lot of people. I often talk about, especially in career, is story selling. You're telling a story that's going to sell to somebody else. So who is your audience? Is your audience someone that really wants to hear about your personal life? Or is that person really saying, great, tell me about your personal life, but only to the degree that it actually matters to the job that I'm trying to hire you for, right? So if I can ask you, do you have a particular kind of work you're interested in? Yeah.
I'll come back over here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I guess the problem that I have is that I'm interested in 1,000,000,001 things.
Okay.
So social entrepreneurship. I mean, the job that I'm going into now is a software company that builds systems for banks and trading desks.
Okay. All right. So you're doing systems build. If you're doing trading desks, you're talking about sales trading. Okay. So you're doing sales trading. So basically finance. Okay. So which part of this, I'm sorry if it's going to bring some other answers you didn't expect, hits you here and go, oh man, that is cool stuff?
The systems build.
Okay. All right. So tell me why is systems build really, really cool for you?
I like taking things from the small seed of an idea and then making them into things that work and that people can use.
Okay.
And also when you have to build big systems, you have to interact with a lot of people. So it brings in people, which I like.
Okay. 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 So you've said people now about 5 times. Do you see? This is really how story comes out. So you have stories, and clearly systems build small idea through people, something they can use. So part of me says you like to solve complex problems.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So complex problem solving is another thing that you clearly care about, right? And think about to when you were, I don't know, middle school. They say that whatever you want to do when you're 10 years old, 10, is really, because as a 10-year-old, you've kind of had long enough of a life to kind of go, I really like this stuff. This is really cool. And we don't care yet what anybody else thinks. So they talk about if you go back to your 10-year-old self and what your 10-year-old wanted, it actually has a lot of truth in terms of the core of it, where you probably would want to go. Do you have any recollection when you were in 5th or 6th grade what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it was a very ambitious goal.
Perfect. The more ambitious, the better.
All right, I wanted to save the world.
Woohoo! Okay, so what does save the world look like to you?
In particular, I wanted to end wars and world hunger. So.
Okay, all right. So end world hunger. Why? Let me ask you. Why does ending world hunger? Why does that matter to you?
Okay, so I think the core of it was that I really liked people and I loved hearing people's stories. And the things that drove me as a 10-year-old to want to save the world was basically I would, on TV, on the street, whatever, I would see all these people with sad stories, people whose lives could have been much better, and for whatever injustices or the way the world is, their lives weren't that good. So it was basically whatever way that I could help make people's lives better, or like lower suffering, or make sure that every individual has the best life that they could have.
Okay, all right. So tell me, where does the Course 2 Meki come in to all of this?
Oh, sorry, I was just telling Judy that I'm Course 6.
Oh, Course 6. I'm sorry, my husband's Course 2.
Right.
Course 6, that's
sorry,
right.
I'm Course 6, and I was telling her that I wish
Done
I'd
Course
done
2.
Course 2.
Okay.
But so the Course 6 comes, I do artificial intelligence, and it's really interesting to me because I get to solve a complex problem, but I also get to think about very human traits, like psychology, and actually my work is on computational storytelling. How do we tell stories? How can I build a software that tells a story with a particular goal for a particular audience?
Wow, I
Yeah.
should talk to you some more.
Okay.
This is very cool. Okay, so if you don't mind sitting there, do you see how our story has already shown up? It keeps recurring, right? And so this notion of complex problem solving, I can probably go back into your life, and you always are trying to figure this out. How do I? It's too hard. Don't worry. No, it's okay. Right? Okay. And people. She just started with people. When she was around 10, she wanted to basically have people basically have better lives. Right? And you said social entrepreneur was your first thing, by the way, when you said career. That was your first words, not not this part of it all, okay? And so this is my point about the voice. This is she's not a plant. We didn't practice this, okay? But there is this thing really about that from the time that you've been on this earth, there's something that compels you. There's not one of us that doesn't have it. It's just whether or not we've had the chance to look at it, whether other people allowed us to hear it, but every single one of us has that voice that says, this is my stuff. This is cool. Blip, okay? And so for you, it's like if I could, so your story is, ever since I was young, I've always been fascinated by people. And in fact, what is it that is possible to make their lives better through understanding systems that may be complex but pivotal in making their lives different?
Mind blown.
I mean, the fact that I'm just saying this, does it feel?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then I must ask you, as well as others, how does sales, trading, and finance fall in here?
Oh my God, I don't know.
Okay, here I've just caused this moment of existential crisis. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's okay. The whole point, you don't have to answer, because that's too much of an answer to ask you to create right now, but is there is never a wrong path that you can take. Okay, what I didn't tell you in the middle of all of this is between my different corporate careers, I actually started up an all-women's fitness center, okay? And I was a certified personal trainer. What the is she talking about, right? And yet all of that led to my coaching today. Do you see what I'm saying? There is never a mistake that you make, even if it's I hate this job, people, whatever it is. Life is actually really, really efficient. It gives us, the only reason you know what you like is sometimes you do the stuff that you hate. I don't like that. Well, good, now you know what you like, So there's nothing that can be wrong even if you accepted a job here, right? And it could actually, the one thing about sales and trading is talk about people dynamics. I mean, it's a lot of activity of complexity, right? But clearly, just in my gut, as I'm hearing, is social entrepreneurship, complex problem solving that has at the end of it betterment of lives. That if you follow that thread, you'll have a rich, happy career.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
I feel like I need to email my mom right now.
Thank you so much for being willing. So what she just did there, bravely, courageously, thank you, is how story begins to evolve. And that's why if a great story actually embodies your voice. The voice is the internal self. And the story is the telling of what the internal self yearns to be, right? And so every single one of you could actually go back into this. And that's why there are index cards for you right there, okay? Really. This is not, as you can tell, I'm not just, I'll talk to you for like 4 hours and have you kind of go out and say, what the heck did she say? I like for you to actually commit to this in this moment. I like for you to take an index card, okay? All right. And I'd like for you to write on that index card, think back to the time when you were around 10, or any time this is pre-college, because sometimes in college, very honestly, we get so intellectualized, our knowledge grows, but our trust of self actually decreases because we're so focused on the intellectual. So I want you to go back in a time where you felt like, I was so me. Whether it's high school, grade school, whatever it was. And I want you to think back to yourself at that point and just, this is talking here. If you can go back to your 10-year-old body, for me it would be my high school body, my sophomore year, and say, what is it that I loved back then? What did I want to do with my life back then? No editing, no criticizing, none of that voice can be here right now. It is pure acceptance of exactly what that person wanted at that time. What was it? And some of you may be blocked. And if you're blocked, don't worry about it. Then be where you are now and say, here's what I would dream. Okay, there's no right or wrong way to do this. But if you can, try to go back there. What did I want to do? What did I care about? You could want to be a doctor, an astronaut, a physicist, a musician, a ballet dancer, an artist, a hobo. I mean, whatever. You know, it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong answer here. What did you want to do with your life at that point? And if you can possibly, at this point, make a connection, and it's okay if you don't, there's no right answer here. I'm trying to really get to this point where you were just asking about the story. How do I make the story? And this is about your career story, okay? It's if you can find that moment. So let me give you an example. When I was 10, I actually wanted to be a pediatrician. Because pediatrician, I identified with kids. And I just wanted to help them. I wanted to help them be better, okay? So it's probably not surprising that I was a political activist in college, making change all the time. I ran for president in high school and won. My whole thing was a change agenda, right? Then I went to leadership positions and corporate thing, and had the most diverse teams. Ended up marrying someone who's half black, half Jewish. All this kind of stuff that didn't make any sense because my whole point was I just want to make life better. I care about people, and now I'm doing leadership development. Some 38 years later, okay? So for me, that line happens to find its way back. So I'm curious for you is some grain in there of whatever earlier version of you that is now showing up in the work that you want to do, okay? Anybody want to raise your hand and tell me about a connection you're making? Really? Do I have to do this? Nobody has to do this, but it could be fun. Oh, hi there. Love it, love it, love it. And the reason I want to give these examples is because theory is hard. This takes it from this existential self into very practical storytelling for work.
So part of what I jotted down as things that I wanted to do as my younger self is sort of anything to do with teaching and imparting knowledge.
Okay.
So a lot of like speaking to people and learning something and sharing that knowledge and seeing, like the light bulb go off.
Why did you like doing that? Do you have a sense back then? What was it?
It's like the satisfaction of like someone didn't understand something and you explain something
Okay.
to them and they fundamentally get it.
Perfect.
And you see that switch.
Okay. Okay, so you're helping decode and figuring something out.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And I think that really plays into like right now I'm considering like alternative careers. Like my background is in electrical engineering, and I'm considering sort of like patent law, that type of thing, where you're really like understanding some technology and explaining it to different people with different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I feel like it kind of ties in.
Yeah, so that's perfect, right? So when I heard it, it's a literal teaching. But no, actually, to actually make patents make sense, right, and to make it legally stick, you have to be able to explain it in a way that others can actually understand. So it's really decoding this complexity into something that within the legal realms is going to make sense, right? And so this is what would be really interesting when someone says, wait a minute, so you went to MIT and I'm sorry, what major are you?
Electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering. And you want to go into patent law? I don't quite get that. What is that? Right? But if she says, well, electrical engineering is highly technical and I've loved the complexity of the technology there and figuring and understanding what makes things work. And I've always loved teaching. Teaching really is about decoding and having other people understand why something works the way that it does and why it's unique. Isn't patent law what it's all about? Right? So you already get it, but I'm actually taking that to the next level and figuring that out. That kind of storytelling, when you're in an interview, is what all of us interviewers are like, whoa, that was a great interview, okay? Because all of us want to find somebody who is not just smart, okay? Smart is amazing. Smart is, technical prowess is unique. Someone with technical prowess that has a passion, that is like the 0.5% that we all go for. I mean, then you have people hunting after you. Proven research, those motivation always outperform those, even if you give them external motivation, but they don't have the internal one. right? It's proven. They're the ones that make the innovations in their field. Because I will work until 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't care who's watching me, because I've just got to figure this out, because I've got the passion, right? So from a storytelling perspective, what we oftentimes will hear is, give me a package of what you can do. But importantly, and what really makes me want to hire you is, why does this make you so interested? And they will also see that those are the individuals over time that really are the technical contributors in organizations or have the passion to lead, because they see what is possible with technology, and they have this yearning drive to keep pushing things forward and pushing things forward and pushing things forward, and one just won't accept it for what it is. So thank you perfectly for that. Yes, for both of you. Thank you both. Okay, so let me be mindful of time. So let me give you the other part that is really important. This notion of storytelling, it's one of the most important things always, is understand who exactly is your audience. Who is your audience, and what do they really, really care about? And that means you have to do a lot of research. We talk a lot about networking, going to MIT alums and talking to them. Look up them on LinkedIn. What are they doing? What do they care about? How do you begin to pitch yourself? And then what I call is, you need to talk about what are the things that I can do? What are my benefits, right, that I can prove in stories of what I have done that's going to be helpful to this particular audience, right? That's a really, really important part, because I can tell you, well, you know what, I just have an amazing love for thinking about technology and apps and so on and so forth, and I can just go on and on about it. And someone says, so tell me a story about that. I have no legs to stand on because I have no tech background at all. But I can make a claim, right? And your claim, if unsubstantiated, makes you basically untrustworthy, right? So that having the stories that these two wonderful women were just talking about is substantiation for why you're telling me and why I should believe it. Now, for women, there are a few things that I want to be really clear about that I really hope that you will begin to think about, is really, really making sure that when you're at the meetings, even academia, it doesn't matter where you are, your voice is heard. Many of the women that I coach at all levels say, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't because I don't really have it all perfectly yet. Let me think about that, and they won't put their hands up. And it happens for years. And then they wonder why they didn't get the promotion they think they should have. My point is, with your education and your knowledge, you've got an idea, get your hand up. Have a point of view about something. Someone else doesn't like it, someone doesn't agree with it, I know, it feels like you got punched in the stomach. You know, I've gone home and cried a lot when I was at P&G, honestly, okay? But I did it anyway because I wanted to be heard, okay? So having your voice wherever you are heard is critically important, because then you matter. No voice in the United States, in any kind of organization, no voice means you're invisible. Invisible people do not get promoted and rewarded over time. Okay? All right. So the other part of it is, we are all walking stories, right? I can say my story has been so horrible. Oh, poor me. Think about me as an immigrant kid, and you know, I could. Or I say, hey, I've got a story that I want to celebrate. Let me tell you why it's such a cool life that I've had. So the question then is, what story do you want to tell? And one of the biggest stories that you're going to be going through going into work, someone says to you, so, let's say you were in the work. Someone says, so, what's going on? Nothing much. All right. So I was at a workshop once, and I was talking to a gentleman. I said, what do you do in the morning when you go into the work? You know, we're talking about how important it is to socialize. He goes, I go and open my computer, get my coffee, and I just work all day. And I said, how does that work for you in terms of promotion? Well, okay. So when someone asks you what's going on, you want to just talk about your life. That's cool. But a big part, especially with senior leaders, if they talk to you, so what's going on, is having a story of what are you working on right now that is of benefit to them. Right? I'm actually really enjoying my current project that is really trying to figure out this specific problem that if we can get these circuits to work, can make a huge difference on what this new hardware that you're trying to develop is going to be able to do. I'm working on it 3 months with our group of 4 people, and I think we're getting close. I think we're having a presentation to you in about 2 months or so, and I hope we'll have good news at that time. A senior leader hears that story and says, wow, that's really cool. You're the person working on that technology. And when you make that connection, guess what happens next time you see him or her in the hallway? They'll remember you. Okay, so my point here is knowledge is great. You need to share your knowledge and how much other people know about you. And one of the things that women really don't do as much of, that we all need to do, is tell stories of how we are making a contribution wherever we happen to be and going out there and talking about it. The thing that happens is, right, why a lot of women don't do it? Because frankly, other women go, and who do you think you are? You're gonna go and talk to everybody? I don't think so. And then you're like, oh, I guess that was a little bit too. For some reason in our socialized world, women that try to stand out get pulled down with the who do you think you are? But you want to be a leader, you want to be the best that you can be and kick the doors down because you're going to do what you're supposed to do in this life. Don't worry about what other people are going to judge you as. We need to be liked. We want to be liked. And being liked is probably the biggest poison that we've been given. Okay? I still work at it every day. That's why I meditate every day. Like, so what if you guys hate me? I'll go home and cry all night, but then I'll live tomorrow again, right? But seriously, it is something that really is hard for women. Finally, the last thing is, put your hand up for a project before you think you are ready. Put your hand up for a project before you think you're ready. If you're still in school right now, go get on that project you don't think you're ready for because your guy friends are going for it, and they may not be anywhere near as ready as you are. But women tend to wait, that gap thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all, because I'm like, hey, this is how we are wired. Except when you're in a system where others tend to go ahead before you would, you will tend to lag. So my whole point is how we're wired is not a bad thing. It's just you have to realize what system that we are in. If you're in that system, then you have to figure out how you can make sure that that which is your talent and your voice really gets heard and gets rewarded out there. Okay? Last one, sponsorship. Sponsorship. Wherever organization that you end up going into, find the people that love to mentor and also have influence. And then have the chutzpah to go and actually ask them to help you grow in your career and really take you on as someone that they can take care of. Okay? I'm realizing it's just almost 1 o'clock. So I've ended up asking one question. Any other thoughts, any other questions that I can entertain at this point? Yes?
Hi. My question would be, how do you ask someone to be your mentor?
Ah, okay, fantastic. So let's say that you see you're in an organization, or even here there's a prof that you really like, you've been in his or her class, and or you've heard her a lecture. I mean, what you literally would do is, nowadays depending on protocol, you call or email and say, and do you know this person by chance, or?
Yeah, we've met a couple times.
Okay, great. So you met a couple of times, and sometimes you don't have to literally say mentor, but you could email that person and say, you know, I've really enjoyed our conversations, and I really believe that I have a lot to learn from you, specifically X, Y, or Z. Every time we've talked, it's really helped me think and expand in my professionalism or in the way of thinking about this particular industry context problem. And I'd like if we could meet regularly so I can have this opportunity to continue the conversation. Anyone that has been in career knows you just asked to be him or her to be a mentor. Okay? If you want to use explicitly, I'd like for you to be a mentor, that's also okay. In most organizations now, the word mentor is very, very much often used. So does that make sense? Okay, but usually it's emailing, talking to someone, telling them how you've benefited from the conversation, and then how you would like to have it going forward. All right? Okay, yeah. Is it time? Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. The delivery part of it all? Okay. Literally the physical body. Okay. So some tricks about this. 60% of communication is body language. Did you notice that I didn't stand in front back of the podium at all the entire time? I'm short. I'm only 5'2". I go back and podium, I'm like, it's so good to see you, right? I really have a lot of power within. So body language, 60%. I'm small. So I've learned I always walk. I do this, guess what? I take space, all right? So taking space is a very big deal. If you're ever sitting at a table in a conference room and you're at work and you tend to be small, someone taught me this is the best thing. He said, spread your paper out around you. Literally, because a guy that's 6'4" comes in and they're like, boom. I sit next to them like, hello. So this guy said, spread your paper out and you'll just have bigger space. And it was so true. Little things like that. It's amazing how that happens. Okay, body language. The other thing is body language. This is power. Right? Ann Cuddy, ANNCUDDY, HBS, has done a lot of research on power positions. Right? You know how guys do this thing? And that's power against you in that moment. They're not conscious of it. That's actually power. Women, of course, are not socialized to do that. So 60% of that is important. The other 30% is tone. It's so good to be here. 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 Okay? Tone is the other 30% that really gets people to actually, hear you and feel you. And it's really the only, the last 10% are the words that are coming out of my mouth. Okay? So you want to make sure that you have this position. Don't look down. And then for women, there's something in the United States about lower voice. Okay? So if I talk to you from a higher voice, I may have a lot, but for some reason when men hear that, they think, oh, aren't you so cute? You put that voice down. I have something to tell you. 3 points I want to talk about. 1 is, 2 is, 3 and somehow all of a sudden, okay? So just something to and then finally is if you do PowerPoint and you have complex things, don't put all words on there, right? If you think about visually, it should be about 70% visual if you can, and only 30% words. That's a big part of it, okay? And finally, this is, I'm so sorry, Jane said, make sure there's Q&A time in there, and then my timer's up there, so I missed it. Okay, last thing is we have in US culture what I call a habit, especially for those, whether it's business, but even academia, headline, and then they have what they call supporting statements, okay? So what I'm saying here, for example, headline is, today it is really, really bad weather, is the headline, because the clouds are out. There's been some, rain and mist going on, so I think there's basically rain going on. So what oftentimes in high context cultures, if you're from Asia, the Middle East, Africa, we start with the whys, the support, and then come back to the headline. But power in the US is, let me tell you what's going on, and let me give you the supporting statements after that. Think about how powerful professors talk. They tend to talk that way. They tell you what the big idea is, and they go from there. All right? I probably should end, just because, is that? Yeah, I'm okay. I just don't want to hold people back if they have to go anywhere else. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. Sure.
So my question is, if you have transitions in your life, if you were interested in one thing when you were 10-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
now you're interested in something else, how do you weave that into your story and make it not sound like you're faking?
Because if you're looking to make a transition, there's a reason why you wanted to make a transition. Does that make sense? So if it's always like making a line. You have to connect the dots together. So if you don't mind, I'll just give you my own example. Someone's going to say to me, "How did you ever become an executive coach when you were in corporate America before? Did something bad happen to you?" Right? And I would say, well, actually, because I've had 20 years of experience in corporate America, and I've always loved helping people be their best, I wanted to find a way to start doing that more, and went into executive coaching and leadership development because I can really focus on those who are in the corporate world be able to be their best. So you need to take something from your past, but that you have a new interest that then is still related to that, and then you can kind of pull it together into where you currently are. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, I know that could take a while. Let me just answer the 2 questions that were here. One is, what's the benefit of an MBA after a PhD? Will it open up job opportunities? The thing is that if you have a PhD in industry, if you can find a really good niche that they want you to focus on, it's great. the one thing we've heard from some that have PhD that's too narrow is they then get so narrowed in you can't get a lot of breadth out there. But if you have a PhD that has leverageability across different industries or within an industry with a lot of different ways, the MBA basically helps you have good language for business. And we feel that you have the strategic thinking, not just what we consider technology, content, and academics. A lot of PhDs with MBAs also go to consulting. A lot of PhDs go directly into like the McKinseys and so on and so forth if you have an industry knowledge that is very, very needed for their consulting practice. And so the difference between contrast storytelling in academia and industry, I would say again, always go back to who is your audience? What do they care about? And making sure that from the point of what they care about is listing what it is that your headline that you can do for them, what it is that you have your story about, and it's always about supporting statements underneath all of that. Okay? So I've run a little bit over on time. I want to thank you for indulging me, letting me talk a bit about myself as an example, hopefully about why voice and story is important. I think for women, again, in your career is constantly be vigilant and really loving what your voice is. What is it I care about? What is that's important to me? Making sure that voice really gets heard loudly by others. And importantly, put your hand up for things that you want, even when you don't feel like you're ready to do so. It really is. And so I'm a Dreambridge Partners. Feel free to email me. I love my work. I'm very lucky to be doing this. So if it's something helpful, I would love to do that. Thanks again for the time, and I wish you all great luck. All right.